Hi, it's Lauren. Thanks for joining me back in my craft room for a Whimsy Stamps video. I'm going to be sharing how I created this stained glass window card with no stamping. It's all die cuts. I'm using the brand new Oh Holy Night die set, and as you can see, I've die cut everything out of some colored cardstock. The only time I used a die twice is my three characters, so my Mary, my Joseph, and the baby. I die cut them once out of their color cardstock, so the blue, the red, and the brown, and then cut them again out of some peach cardstock to create their faces. I'm going to start by assembling Mary, who's on the left in blue. I use a piece of tape just to be able to glue the face inside of the shape of the body. And next I'm going to work on her headpiece. Now I made a little mistake here. I should have glued down this white piece before gluing down kind of what looks like to be like a headscarf for Mary. And that's because this white piece goes underneath that blue. So I just peeled it back before the glue was too dry and went ahead and stuffed it in there and then closed it back up. And I just used my reverse tweezers to make sure that that had enough time to dry. Next, I'm going to glue on the darker shade of my Mary, which is her sleeve, her right sleeve, and I'm going to glue that to her as well. I love this die because it gives you everything you need and you can just die cut everything out of colored cardstock, and it makes for a really easy Christmas card. So once I have those pieces glued, I'm going to move on to adding her white part of her sleeve, and this goes on the bottom left hand corner of our Mary. And after that, she is all done and I can move on to Joseph. Now Joseph, I'm going to glue this top part of his headpiece on, and then I'm going to add that tape, very similar like I did with Mary, to the back of the largest die cut. I'm going to add that tape so that way I can glue the face into Joseph's silhouette as well. So now that that headpiece is done with both of the layers, I'm going to grab that tape, and again I like to use my reverse tweezers just to apply some extra pressure. I'm just using some repositional tape, but you can use anything in your stash like scotch tape or washi tape, anything that will just hold those pieces together because you're going to be gluing everything down to a card base once you're done assembling. Next, I'm going to work on adding Joseph's sleeve, which is his left sleeve, and that's going in the bottom right corner. And then we're going to add that white touch similar to what is on Mary's sleeve. And that also gets layered into the bottom right corner. And with that, our Joseph is done, and I can move on to the baby Jesus. I'm going to adhere down everything to this kind of glowing orange piece. And for this piece, I don't need to add any tape for inserting the face inside of the wrapped baby. I'm going to just glue the wrapped baby down to the golden halo that's behind the baby, and then add some glue inside of the opening, and then I will just drop that face die cut piece right inside. Now the circle cuts out a full circle as well as a halo, and so I decided to glue both of them together. I thought it would look really nice having that die cut line just to really distinguish between the two pieces. It looks like a halo. So I'm gluing that down to the orange glow piece and then adding the glue to the assembled baby. And that fits nicely onto that center piece. So now all of my pieces are assembled and I can stage them together. So we have Mary and Joseph, and then you can add the baby in the center, and then the star fits very nicely at the top above the image. I also die cut the sentiment "Oh Holy Night" out of some black cardstock. It's a very dainty sentiment. I think it's so beautiful. I love the script. So I have "Oh Holy Night," and the night actually breaks up into two. So there's the N and then the IGHT. And you don't want to forget your little dot above the I. I believe it's called a tittle. And I made sure to poke that out and I wouldn't lose it. So here's all my die cut pieces. We have a perfect card already with no stamping. And what I love is that the Oh Holy Night die set fits perfectly inside of the stained glass window die set. So I have two of my die cuts. They haven't been snipped apart yet, so I use that to my advantage to cut out this frame out of some metallic cardstock. And then I'm going to use that inside piece. I snipped it apart. And I'm going to be using some shiny vellum, but because it is vellum, I don't want any of my adhesive to show, so I'm going to use an adhesive sheet. So I'm just trimming it to fit in a corner of my vellum that will be able to cut out nicely for my die cut piece. So I trimmed it down and I'm just applying it to the back of my vellum. And then I will cut it out with some large scissors. So I have a rectangle with the vellum and adhesive on the back, and then I will run that through my die cut machine. So now I have an inside of my stained glass window with a nice sheen to it. So now I can start getting my card put together. I'm going to start with my metallic frame. So I'm just adding some wet glue and I'm going to adhere this down directly to my card base. Now I end up switching gears if you saw the picture in the beginning. So I am showing you my process, but I end up changing the layout a little bit at the end. So I'm just going to glue this frame directly onto this white cardstock. And once that's done, I will add my vellum piece. So the great thing is that there already is an adhesive sheet behind it. So all I have to do is get them separated, which I have a little trouble. So I edited out how long it took me to separate those two pieces. But once I get it peeled, I can then apply this directly onto my card base and it fits snugly inside of my frame. And then I'm going to use wet glue to adhere the rest of my pieces down. So I'm going to grab my Mary and then I will add some glue behind her and I will put her onto the bottom left hand of my stained glass window scene. Of course, I had to make sure it would fit nicely. So now I'm adding the glue and I'm placing that again on the bottom left. And then I will pick up Joseph and I will add glue behind him. And I will add him to the bottom right of the scene. And once that's done, I will put glue behind the baby Jesus. And I will add him to the center in between Mary and Joseph. And the bottom point of that glowing orange cardstock piece will align with the bottom of my Mary and Joseph. Now I'll add the star, again just using wet glue and gluing it down. There's not a lot of dimension on this card, but the die cuts themselves do create the dimension because of the layering and the different colors. So while this is, I guess you could say, a flat card, there is still a lot of dimension just based on how these die cuts come together. Now for my sentiment, I'm just going to add it directly onto my card base. So I'm going to line it up so it's nice and straight and evenly spaced. And then I'm going to use some repositional tape to help me pick that up. And that way when I add my adhesive to the back of my sentiment, I know I can apply it directly onto my card and it will be lined up how I wanted it on my mat. So I'm making sure it will fit nicely and centered on the card. And then I'm going to use my wet glue with a fine tip and just add little dots behind each of those letters. And then I just use my finger to kind of tap off some of the glue. That way, when I press it down to my card base, the glue doesn't just squeeze out the sides underneath all my die cut letters. And once that is in place, I will remember my little tittle and I will flip it over so that way I can pick it up with my jewel picker. I'm going to add some wet glue right to where I want to apply this little die cut piece, and then I will drop it down using that jewel picker, and now I have my eye all put together. Once my sentiment is dry, I can pull off that tape very slowly so I don't rip anything, and now my sentiment looks aligned just how I had it on my grid mat. So this was going to be the end of my card, but it was so plain. I just couldn't leave it like this. It felt too white, I guess you could say. I wish I would have put it on a darker background, but there was no turning back. Everything was glued down. So I thought I would add some color to the edges of the card. So I wanted to create that glowy look that our star and our baby Jesus give off in the scene. So I would just use some tape to block off the top of the card, so where it bends over to the back. And I'm just using a distress brush and some distress ink to add some color around my background. And I really liked that. I thought it did give a nice glow to the card. I peeled off the paper or I peeled off the tape and looked at my card, and it still felt like it was missing something. It just needed something else. So I decided to trim my card base down, and instead of it being card base, I would trim off 1/8 of an inch from each side. So that's a 1/4 inch total, but because I already had everything centered, I just trimmed off 1/8 of an inch from each side. And then the black cardstock that I cut my sentiment out of, I decided to glue those together, and that added a little bit more to my background that I was looking for. So I grabbed a new card base, and I'm going to glue that black cardstock down directly to my card base. Again, this is a flat card with no actual foam adhesive for dimension, and I'm applying that to my card base. And then I will use wet glue on the back of my stained glass piece and adhere that directly to the center of my card. And that really just, I felt, framed my scene a lot more, and I was very happy that I decided to go this way. And of course, no card is complete without some glitter. So I'm grabbing my clear embellishment, and it has some glitter inside of it. It's called Snowflake. And I'm just squeezing some dots onto my card. I do 5 total. I like to keep things in odd numbers. And to create a more domed look, I just tap the back of the card, and that gets rid of that Hershey Kiss look to your embellishments. And then I added some glitter to any of the white spots as well as the halo around the baby Jesus, and that finishes off my card. I hope you enjoyed this card tutorial. If you did, please click that like button. And if you're new here, I hope I've inspired you to subscribe and come back. You can find everything I used to create this card down below in my description. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.